All right, well, I went ahead and dropped the pan, and no surprise, it was leaking oil. About half of the bolts were missing, particularly on the driver's side of the engine. Not really sure what was going on there, but about half the bolts were literally just gone, and the rest of them were all a little more than hand tight. So not a real shocker that she was leaking oil. I don't think it was the rear main at all. I'm pretty sure it was the oil pan gasket that was leaking. It just was leaking right down around the back end where it was able to throw it up and around inside there. I went ahead and pulled the valve cover off, and you can see everything up here looks beautiful. I sprayed a little bit of cleaner on there just to double check, and I found a few little odds and ends chunks of stuff, but it looked like I found some what looked like old pieces of gasket material that were up in here. So I think somebody had changed the gasket at some point but hadn't done a complete job of cleaning the old gasket material out. But it looks clean. There's no oil. I don't see anything that looks like rust or anything that really worries me there. I see a little bit of discoloration here. So that might be something to consider. Might be something to worry about. But when I drained the water, there was no oil in the water. When I drained the oil, there was no water in the oil. So I think we're going to be in good shape. Everything looks clean, and no gunk or buildup or anything of that nature. So should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put the new gasket on there, and we'll be ready to roll. Made a parts run and got what I needed. So I got the new pan gasket. Comes in 4 pieces. That's always a little bit challenging, always worries me a little bit, but we'll use a little bit of adhesive on the pan, and when we lift it up into place it'll hold it. And then here's the new gasket for the valve cover. See, I bought a new torque converter. The one I had was very questionable. It was full of water, and I suppose theoretically I could have cleaned it out, but to me it just wasn't worth it. With the rebuilt transmission, yeah, I might be saving some money now by cleaning that out, but in the long run, is the other one going to be better? It's a toss-up. To me, it was worth the money to invest. And then got a new flex plate, because the piece that was on there, the flywheel, that's for really more of a, it's set up, I think, for a manual transmission is what the flywheel would have been used for. It looks like the same bolt pattern as they would have used for a clutch and that sort of system. And if I had that sort of transmission on hand, I might go that route. But I also want this to be a vehicle my wife can drive. She and a clutch don't exactly get along, so we're going to go with a flex plate. We'll get the torque converter bolted onto the, hooked up to the transmission. Then once the whole thing's bolted together, then we'll hook those 2 guys up, and everything should work good according to my measurements. Everything lines up right. Got a set of brand new bolts for getting that done, and we'll be good to go. All right, well, you can see they've got the pan all cleaned up, and looks pretty good inside. Nothing that again, nothing that really concerns me. I got a little bit more cleaning up to do, but I got the heavy stuff off, and then we're going to put new gaskets on this and get it reattached to the bottom end of the engine. You can see I've got the 6-cylinder all torn apart here. The bottom of it is off, and we showed the top of it a little bit, but I got the underside of that all cleaned up, and it is now ready to accept gaskets. So that is clean, that is ready to go. I'll probably give it one last wipe with some acetone or something to make sure that it's free of oil, and then I'll do a final clean on the pan, and then we'll be ready to go. And all I'm going to do is, I've got some good RTV sealant, room temperature vulcanization. It's just a silicone based product, and it's a humidity cure. And so just by having it out in the open air, it'll cure. And I'll put just a thin layer, just enough to hold the gaskets in place on here, and that way we can just put it right up into place. And then I'll just set the whole thing in as level as I can, because it came out nice and level. There's nothing that's going to impede that on the engine. And actually, I'll take you around to the passenger, or the driver's side of the engine, the other side from where we were. And you can see I did go ahead and get the exhaust off of that. There's the exhaust, the little flange, the first pipe right here, off there. And I took that off last night. And so now we're ready to start reassembly. Everything looks real good inside and nice and clean. No water marks or anything that would concern me about the quality, state of the engine or the head gasket or anything like that. So we are in good shape and ready to start reassembly. It is my opinion that it's a wise idea to lay all the pieces out. So you can see I've got my oil pan here, and you can see I've got the two parts of the gasket. It comes in 4 pieces. And so what I want to show you is that on this side, I've made sure that I've got all the holes lined up, that everything matches up right, and that I did in fact buy the right gasket set. It is possible to get the wrong gasket set for this. Even the 250, which has been around forever, has gone through some minor redesign. So you want to make sure that you've got the right gasket set. Not such a big deal on the pan as it is on the valve cover gasket, because there are a number of them available for that. The pan is pretty straightforward, but I want to point something out. On this side of the motor, which would be the passenger side, as I go down here, you can see all the holes line up good, everything looks right until I get to the bend, and then you'll see that this one's a little bit off and the holes get a little further out of alignment every time. Now it is true that I could just leave it like that and then tweak it once it was up on the vehicle, but in my opinion, if I'm going to be holding something up into place, it's a lot easier if I just get it right to begin with. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stretch this part just a little bit, and I'm going to do it very gently because I don't want to tear the cork. I don't know any magic tricks for this other than just to do it. So here's how I do this. I'm just going to set you down here, and I'll bring that part over. All right, and so right here, right where it makes this bend, I want this to be open just a little bit more. So I'm just going to very gently pull, and I'm just going to stretch this side of the gasket just a little bit and be very gentle because clearly you don't want to rip it. Okay, and also worth noting, you can see the blue stripes. The blue stripes go against the pan. Okay, the blue stripe side. The other side does not have any stripes on it. So let's lay this back in place and see how I did. All right, it's not perfect, but it's a whole lot better. Okay, so I might do just a little bit more of that, or instead of trying to flex it more here, I might bend it a little bit more right here. Do it in a couple different spots, because this hole looks like it's lined up pretty good now, along with everything else on the vehicle. On the pan, and so if I just stretch this just a little bit more in this spot, I think it'll be better. So that's just a trick that I like. Also, when I put the little bit of adhesive on there, remember too, when you're putting adhesive, you don't need too much. It's not to seal it. I'm just using it to hold the gasket in place. The seal is going to happen when this material gets compressed. Cork does a great job of that, and the rubber seals too. So there you go. We're going to put a little slick of sealant on there, and we'll start putting things in place. Very quickly, I just wanted to show you that this particular gasket set comes with little spikes, and there are little holes in the, let's back up so you can see it focus. There are little holes here that those spikes fit into, and a little difficult to show on camera. I apologize for the jiggliness, but you can see that spike pushes through and holds that gasket in place for you. So it's all there. The rubber gasket you can see is in place. It's held in place by those little spikes. And you got to make sure you have a clean surface and you've cleaned the old spikes out, because the old ones might be crusty and hard. But once you get that, that'll hold that in place, so when I lift the pan up, I don't have to worry about that falling down. The one in the back, this is the front of the engine, of course. This is the underneath the timing chains under here, the timing gears. But you can see that that one's held in place, and the back one's held in place. It kind of locks in to a channel, and you'll be able to see that as well. Okay, we're standing at the back of the engine. You can see the back of the crank right here. And what I want to show is that this part of the gasket has two tabs that flare forward toward the front of the engine. You want to make sure they flare forward, and that way they'll go underneath the cork, and they'll hold everything in place. Also, it sits right into this little groove. There's a little groove right here, and this guy will just fit right into that groove. It'll just lock right in place, and you'll be good to go. Okay, so now you can see I've seated that gasket. I just pushed it up into place. It's just a pressure fit and it'll stay right there. And make sure again that your hole lines up with your gasket before you start trying to lift the pan in place. It's heavy and awkward, not super heavy by itself, but when you're trying to hold it up and get bolts started, it's frustrating. So the more work you can get done in advance, the better off you're going to be. Well, there's no doubt this would be easier if I had two people. But I don't. So we're just going to lift her up into place. I've got bolts ready. I've got both of my front and rear parts of the seal in place. So just lift it up gently and carefully. Trying to keep her clean, keep it aligned. And get it up into place enough to get a couple bolts started, one on each side at least. That's my goal, is at least one on each side. I've got one on the driver's side. So now if I come around to the passenger side, and just do it by hand, just enough to hold that in place. And now I can work my way out. Now, it is always my opinion, and I'm sure there are people who will disagree, because what else is new? It's YouTube. But always, I work from the middle out on any pan. Always work from the middle out to the edges, to the corners. You're less likely to get wrinkles in your gasket. You're much more likely to get a solid seal that way. It's been my experience from years of doing this stuff. It always works better. Also, I get everything started all the way around. Nothing tight. Hand tight at most, and usually I don't even go all the way tight. I go maybe just snug and then back it off maybe half a turn to allow a little bit of wiggle while I get all the bolts started. And there's like 19 bolts on this thing, so take your time. And they're two different sizes. Some of them have the 7/16 head, some of them have a 1/2 inch head. And so there's two different sizes. You're going to have to get the right ones in the right spots. There's also a couple different lengths, so you got to make sure you get the right ones in the right places. But here's my point, is if you leave it loose enough that it can wiggle just a little bit, not a lot, it's not loose, it's not banging, but I can tweak it and adjust it as I go. But I work from the middle out, get everything started, then torque everything down, just hand tight, just with a simple tool like this. Just hand tight, no leverage, just hand tight, working my way around, get everything snugged, and then go down, tighten it a little bit, maybe as tight as I can with this, and then get a good ratchet and start to work and incrementally tighten it all down. I just find by taking the time to do it right the first time, it might take you an extra 10 minutes right now, but how much is that going to save you down the road if you don't get leaks, you don't get cracked gaskets, you don't get problems? I just find it's worth a few extra minutes. And look, seriously, this is not a high dollar build here, okay? I'm just talking basic, fundamental, good idea type mechanical stuff. Always a good idea to do it that way. So I'm not going to bore you by putting all the bolts in and everything in front of you here, but that's the next step, is to go around, get all the bolts in, and tighten those down. Alright, so I've got all the bolts in there. The good news is they all went in without any problem. The bad news is I told you there was 19 bolts. There's 24 bolts. 20 of them are 7/16 head. Some of them, 4 of them are 1/2 inch. So all I'm going to do is start in the middle, and I just go until it snugs up. And I just work my way all the way to the edge, both directions, working out from the middle. And again, I'm certain there are people who will tell me it's wrong because it's the internet and that's what people love to do. But I have found it's a great way to make sure you get a good seat. And also, Again, I'm not tightening these. It may look like I'm tightening them down tight. I'm just tightening them until they're snug, trying to feel that they're all about the same. I'm not using a torque wrench yet. I'm not going anywhere near that tight. I'm just trying to seat them. You can see that I'm compressing the gasket just ever so slightly. The bottom of the flange, you can see the flange on the pan is coming up to meet the gasket. That's all I'm trying to do. Just snug it up. And I work my way around doing exactly that. That's 1.5 inches. And so we'll switch out because I hit a 1/2 inch at both ends. So we'll just snug that up. Making sure I got a good seal between the rubber and the cork here. They should overlap. If they don't overlap, you've probably done something wrong or you've got a bad gasket set, but I think any quality gasket set is going to work that way. Now the one I bought is cork. You can buy ones that are paper or different materials similar to paper. It's going to look like paper or cardboard. I've done both and I've not found any real benefit one way or the other. The paper ones are less likely to crack than a cork one is. Cork will crack, but cork, when it gets hit by that oil, it swells up and stops from leaking. So as long as it doesn't split, and usually that's because of the way it's installed. If it's installed right, you don't have any places where it bunches up or any places where it's being pulled. If it's laying flat and you've done a nice job ironing it in, taking your time to get it level, you shouldn't have trouble with cork splitting and cracking like that. I mean, anything with age is going to run into a problem. I mean, 20 years down the road, maybe, but certainly in the next 5 to 10 years, I would not expect to see any problem from a cork gasket. Okay, so I've finished tightening that down both sides hard as I can by hand. Now it's time for my ratchet. And so a question that's worth asking is, well, how tight should you get it with the ratchet? I suppose a lot of that question depends on your grip strength and how tight you got it the first time around. These are actually pretty tight. So I'm just making sure that they all feel the same snugness. And then I'm going to get my torque wrench and just get them down to the right foot-pounds, and we're good to go. And again, just working from the middle out. Same thing. Guys, seriously, if I can do this, you can do this. It's not too hard. One thing I do want to say about safety, I'm sure somebody will be upset that I'm working with the engine up on my cherry picker. The cherry picker is blocked, so the pump, it is possible for a jack to fail, always. And so I have the shaft of that blocked in place with a pipe section that is designed to fit over the main shaft, and it supports the lift in place so that I don't have any accidents. Also, somebody said, well, the chain could break. I suppose that is a possibility, but on the other hand, I keep all my stuff in good condition, and I try not to put any vital body part anywhere that is dangerous, if at all possible. Sometimes you have to look underneath things and things like that. I suppose there is a certain element of risk in anything that you do. It is possible you could put this up on an engine lift. If you have one of those, you could use that. I was really trying to demonstrate with this what it is to be able to change this. And obviously underneath the vehicle you're going to have to deal with cross members and things underneath the pan and stuff like that. Out of the engine bay is far easier, there's no doubt about that. So just a couple things to keep in mind. We always preach safety here on our channel, and I would always encourage you to make sure that things are well supported. You're doing everything that you can to keep yourself safe. I mean, there's no amount of planning that's going to take out every contingency. There's always a possibility for injury. It might be as simple as, bash knuckles and, scratches and scrapes to, something far more serious. But I would always encourage you to be safe with what you're doing and take care. So.